Hello, in this video, we're going to learn how to paint this skull in gouache. Materials are listed below and a link to the reference photo. So part one, step by step, let's go. So I've drawn out my skull on 300-pound watercolor paper, and then I've taped it down to my matte surface. You can also do this on a foam board or whatever you have. And I'm going to use a flat wash watercolor brush to first get the paper wet, and then I'm going to do an underpainting with rose violet. An underpainting serves lots of purposes. It tones your paper, makes it easier for the color to see, and preps the paper for the upcoming painting. The underpainting that I'm doing, I want it to be nice and saturated because we're doing a reddish, pinkish skull. So I want it to be nice and dark so that I can put really light tones on top. So after these two coats, I'm going to go in with mid-tones. So I'm starting with an already prepped surface, totally dry. Let those two first layers dry. Then with a round synthetic watercolor brush, I'm going to go in with mid-tones to start. The colors I'm using are permanent red and white, and then we're going to mix our own black. So I've mixed up a little bit of the permanent red, nice and saturated. So that's a lot of paint from the tube and just a little bit of water. You want a nice consistency. This skull is going to be monochromatic, so it's going to be one color. And it's going to be this permanent red plus tints, which are usually lighter tones, and shades, which are darker tones. I'm going to lay out just the mid-tones first using this permanent red. So if we're looking at the reference photo, which if you're following along with me, you should be doing a lot, I'm kind of looking at not where the bright lights are, not where the shadows are, but where there are bigger swashes of nice mid-tones. We're going to go in later and create more highlights and more shadows, but just to kind of get the painting started and be able to blend out, I'm laying down a lot of this permanent red. If you don't have permanent red, that's okay. You can use any color at your disposal, but I would recommend going monochromatic with me, especially if you're just learning. So we've laid down some large areas of our midtone. Then with just a wet brush, no fresh paint, we're gonna wet some of the edges of that hard paint line. This is the beginning of the process of blending. We're going to put some colors next to it, but this gets us ready. It makes the paint less and less saturated as it moves across the surface. An important thing to remember when you're using a water-based medium is that your water controls your saturation. So the wetter that your brush is, the wetter that your puddle of paint is, the less saturated that'll be. The drier it is, the more pigment heavy it is, the generally darker it will be. So with this method, we're getting our blending ready. So we're going from a mid, pretty saturated area to a lighter area. And keep checking that reference photo. Look back a lot of painting, a lot of art making is looking and paying attention to shadows and highlights and not an idea of what a skull looks like, but what you're actually looking at. So I'm going to work until the entire skull surface is covered. I'm working from the least detailed areas, the bigger surfaces of the skull, towards the more detailed areas. So I'm going to save the eye sockets and the nose and the teeth until after the major areas of the skull are covered. You don't have to work this way. You can do it all at once, but this way I'm setting a tone for the whole painting, working the large areas to the small ones. Working the biggest surface first, and then I'm going to move forward, making sure that there's water and paint all over the skull, everywhere that I want to be blended. So now that I've got the whole background surface covered, I'm going to go back in and kind of subtract. You can do this many ways. You can do it the way that I'm doing in the video, where I get a really wet brush, kind of scrub away some of that paint, dab it on either a paper towel or I'm using a rag, and kind of take some of that pigment away. Once I've got most of the surface area covered, then I can pay closer attention to the detail, like where the highlights are, like on the ridge of the nose, the under socket of the eye. And one of the great things about gouache is that it's really malleable. It's really easy to work with. And since it's a water-based medium, all you need to add or subtract is water. We're going to keep going back over these surfaces, over the places that we've painted. We're laying a foundation, and part of painting is patience. You're going to paint a area, and then you're going to let it dry. Then you're going to go back. Maybe you're going to take some of that away, make it lighter, make it darker. And we're still pretty early on in our painting process, and you can already see the details coming through. The skull is feeling more dimensional already. Then we're going to move into the foreground of this painting, starting with the eye sockets. Again, eye sockets, if we're like thinking about a cartoon skull, they're totally black, but there's a little more nuance. There's a little more detail if we're working this sort of half stylized, half realistic painting style. And we're still paying attention to how much water we're using, controlling that saturation as we move from the dark parts of the eye sockets and the teeth and the nose to the lighter parts. Okay, so that's the end of part 1. We're going to come back with 2 and 3 and finish up this gouache skull study. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Rebecca. I'm an artist, and I'll be uploading tutorials for drawing and painting. I'm on Instagram at rebv_art and TikTok with the same. If you found the reference photo, then you've been to my website, and you can also find me there. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.